Welcome back to Yoshi Entertainment, everybody. So I'm sure everybody has heard by now this very unsettling, very disturbing situation, if you will, that has been taking place with the pastor Robert Morris. For those of you who don't know who this man is, he's a televangelist, if you will, also the founding pastor of Gateway Church in South Lake, Texas, as it says right here. Now, this man has been preaching the gospel, and I put that in quotation marks, and you'll see why I did that, for decades, quite literally. And it is now just coming out, and if I'm not mistaken, it's because the young woman who was wronged was the one who came out and said what happened. It's now coming out that decades ago, 35 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, he mishandled, and it goes so far beyond just mishandling this woman whenever she was a child. We're going to read through what they said. We're going to read through what she said. We're going to really get into what's going on here, because there are some people who are really trying to make the situation seem like something that it's not. They're really trying to repaint this situation into something that it's not. But as I said before, we like to tell the truth and shame the devil over here. We're going to promote the truth over here. Now, whenever this first hit the media, this man allegedly had the audacity to get on to social media, whatever, release a statement, if you will, saying that he, and I quote, has confessed to inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady more than 35 years ago while he was a young pastor, after a woman accused him of sexually abusing her over multiple years, beginning when she was 12, end quote. Oh, but it gets so much worse. He then goes on to make another statement, and I quote, "When I was in my early 20s, I was involved in inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady in a home where I was staying. It was kissing and petting and not intercourse, but I was wrong. This behavior happened on several occasions over the next few years," Morris said in a statement. The Christian Post, after Gateway Church was asked about the allegations. Now, this is the part where I was talking about they were trying to make this situation seem like something that it was not. They tried to minimize what happened, what he did, what took place with this now woman who was a 12-year-old when this started. Notice when he said he was just petting her, it was inappropriate, he was wrong, but there was no intercourse. Notice that he said this out of his own mouth. Notice that he also called her a young lady. That's not a slip of the tongue. It's not a Freudian slip. He said what he said, and he meant it. He should have said a girl, a child, because that's what she was at the time. Calling her a young lady would insinuate that she was a woman, that she was the legal age of consent, that she was 21. She was not. See how people play these games when it comes to social media? The terminology that they use to make it seem like what they did wasn't so bad. The fact that he did this and then said it like this just makes him look all the more worse. And we're going to get into once again why it was so horrible. Aside from him taking blatant advantage of somebody's daughter, we're going to get into it because some people really only read a couple of lines of what he said, didn't think much of it. But we're going to get into it. He then goes on to make another statement, and I quote, "In March of 1987, the situation was brought to light and it was confessed and repented of. I submitted myself to the elders of Shady Grove Church and the young lady's father. They asked me to step out of ministry and receive counseling and freedom ministry, which I did. Since that time, I have walked in purity and accountability in this area," Morris added. End quote. This article also states that allegedly he returned to the ministry 2 years after this was allegedly exposed the first time. He claimed with the father's blessing, the father of the survivor. So for anybody who's not familiar with these terms, because, they're not really involved in the church and this kind of church mess, what he's claiming, what they were claiming, is that he repented, that he asked God for forgiveness, which I'm really starting not to believe he really did. He tried to lump, is what it seems like, him asking that young woman when she was a child for forgiveness and her family actually being honest and truthful as a man of God in front of his congregation and admitting what he did, because this is not one of those situations you just sweep under the rug and ignore what you did. And then ask that young girl's father, "Oh, can I return back to the ministry, despite what I did? I apologize, etc., etc." And also the elders of that church, and they all collectively said, "Oh yeah, sure." He allegedly even claimed that he, and I quote, "asked their forgiveness and they graciously forgave me," end quote. Now, I'm about to get into why I don't believe anything that he said, anything that came out of his mouth. I don't believe that he truly repented, because when you repent, you change your behavior. I don't believe he asked that girl for forgiveness. I don't believe that he even asked her father if it was a good idea for him to go back into ministry. First of all, there shouldn't have been no questions. He should be in jail right now, because allegedly, what we're about to discuss, he was doing PDF file behavior. He was essentially a PDF file. Still is, if you ask me. I don't believe anything that he said. And I also don't believe that that was the only time, contrary to him saying, oh, that was that one and only time and I was doing better after that. Don't believe that either. Now, I do have a problem with them calling this woman, who is now, older now. Her name is Cindy Clemishire. I don't like the fact that they're calling her an accuser. I've said before, for us to have to say allegedly concerning things that we know happened, or that there's proof that happened on this internet because they want to censor us, is absolutely absurd. But to call somebody an accuser, who the abuser, who the PDF file, because that's exactly what he is, admitted to doing to the victim, is just foul. Now, Cindy came out and set the record straight, because allegedly he was telling some very false information in those quotes that he made to try and cover for himself and make himself look better. So Cindy came out and talked about how this man had started abusing her in the winter of 1982. And it continued for 4.5 years. Then she contacted the Christian Post and let them know. She's 54 now, by the way, and a grandmother. But let them know that the details in the report, as it said, she was able to confirm. They know that it was her that this did take place. Y'all know I gotta say allegedly. Although she let them know, and I quote, she was no young lady when Morris began abusing her, end quote. This is what I was talking about whenever I said he wasn't being honest with some of these details, that now I don't believe anything that comes out of his mouth, because if he couldn't even be honest after this many years, nothing he says is trustworthy. Now, expounding on that comment about her not being a young lady, she was saying that she was not a young lady. Again, that would insinuate that she was an adult. She was a child when this took place, and the fact that it even has to be broken down, especially him trying to cover it up, is just sick and disgusting. Again, we need to keep reiterating the fact that he lied about her being a young lady, which again would insinuate she was an adult. She was not. She was a 12-year-old child, a minor. She said, and I quote, I was a little girl, a very innocent little girl, and he was brought into our home, he and his wife Debbie and their little boy Josh, and trusted and preached at the church that my dad helped start, and then began grooming all of us to do this, which took me decades to wrap my brain around as an adult, she said, end quote. She continued by saying, and I quote, it went on for many years. He says there was no sexual intercourse, but he did touch every part of my body and inserted his fingers into me, which I understand now is considered a form of R-word by instrumentation. I was an innocent 12-year-old little girl who knew nothing about sexual behavior, end quote. I've said before, this is why I go so hard in the paint when it comes to these kids and young, impressionable, naive, inexperienced young people, minors, who some of these sicko pedophile adults think it's acceptable to nurture relationships with, especially sexual relationships with. It'll always be an issue. It's always going to be a problem. It's always going to be wrong. The child in this situation always gets taken advantage of. They get messed over. Their lives are never going to be the same. And unfortunately, these things are going to have to be dealt with by them for the rest of their lives, because some, again, sicko pedophile adult took advantage of them. This is what people are trying to stop by speaking out against this kind of stuff, these kind of behaviors, these perverted mindsets that have been going around and being promoted on social media, as you all have seen, I'm sure, these last couple of years. This article goes on to state that this guy was 20. They say that he was a 20-year-old, but if I'm not mistaken, he was in like his mid-20s, if I'm not mistaken, or he had gotten to his mid-20s while all of this was happening. Throughout the years, he was doing this to this young girl at the time. He was married, had a child of his own while he was doing this. Apparently, allegedly, he had met her and her family a year before this had started happening, because he was going to and he was traveling as an evangelist, and he went to their youth revival. And this is another thing you all need to be mindful of concerning your children. I'm not saying that all preachers, pastors, evangelists, bishops, whoever are all bad and out to get your children. But some of these people in the church, they're not the saved individuals that they claim to be. You got to use a lot of wisdom and discernment when you're coming in contact with them and allowing them around your children. Please be careful, because some of these people are only using the pulpit and God's platform to get access to your children, to take advantage of them. I said some of them, not all of them. Especially some of these youth pastors. Like I said before, not all of them, but some of them only become youth pastors so they can get access to your youth, to your young people. Like I said before. She recounted how this man started preaching a lot more at her church, the church that she was going to regularly, and that her family and his family and he all became friends real quick. So quick, in fact, that these people were even inviting him and his family to their home and going on trips with him. As I've spoken before on this channel about, this is the gateway, if you will, everybody. Them getting close to people's family, especially the father, the parental figures of the family, getting comfortable, having the victim feel comfortable around them, getting in their personal space, getting to the point where you feel comfortable enough to, invite them into your home, or the victim's parents, guardians are inviting them to the home or other places where it makes that particular individual, that child, that victim, very vulnerable to be taken advantage of. Anyways, she went on to say that that day, on Christmas night, mind you, in 1982, was the day that changed everything. Inviting him over there was the worst decision that her family could have made for her, unfortunately. Allegedly, it was during a car ride in which she was sitting next to the pastor, where he asked her to come and see him in the room at night. An adult male telling a 12-year-old child to come and see him in his room at night. And before anybody makes any excuses for him, once again, this is a child. Back in the day, especially in the 80s, in the 70s, it was always, you listen to the adults, point blank, period. They're never wrong. You're always wrong. You're the stupid child. You listen to them. Now it's much more different than what it was back in the day. And a lot of people who have been in that time can testify to that. Back in the day, they did not listen to kids. And you just did what you were told to do. Beat it into people's heads so much that if you didn't listen to adults, no matter what they said, you didn't listen to authority, that means you weren't obedient to authority, you weren't submissive, that you were an arrogant brat who did not want to listen, who didn't want to be obedient. And especially in the church, they were real ready to hit you with that. Your days are going to be shortened if you didn't listen to the people that were older than you. So this child essentially was doing what he told her to do because he was the adult in the situation. She didn't know any better. And it sickens me when people try to make excuses for this adult male who told this child to do this. Some adult, some raggedy behind perverted adult had the audacity, allegedly, to try and make it seem like she brought it on herself, trying to say that she was acting flirty with the pastor. Once again, we live in a sick society that really thinks that a child is responsible for an adult taking advantage of him or her. She even described what she was wearing that night, because people were really trying to use that as an excuse to justify her being sexually assaulted by an adult male. And I quote, "She was wearing pink pajamas with bloomer pants. She wore underwear underneath. She had a snap-up robe on." End quote. Now, I included these pictures to give everybody a rough idea of what that might have looked like. These are not the exact clothes that she was wearing, of course. This is just a rough Googled idea of those articles of clothing so people can get an idea, like I said, of what she was talking about, because this is clothes back from the 80s. Some people might not be familiar with these particular articles of clothing, the name, what it means, what it would look like. So imagining in your head she is wearing this, a child, again, and people are trying to justify what this adult chose to do to this child. Again, we've got to call this sickness out for what it is. And we got to start shaming people. She then went on to talk about how, like I said before, he told her to come into the room at night, to basically not tell anybody, to lay on the bed while he essentially fondled and groped her. Even went so far to put his hands under her underwear, then had the audacity to tell her, and I quote, "Never tell anyone about this because it will ruin everything," end quote. And I also quote, Clemshire claims Morris repeatedly abused her in Texas and Oklahoma, and he often told his wife that he was merely counseling her during the abuse. Once again, here we go with using this disguise of saying, oh, I'm a counselor, I'm a youth pastor, I'm a mentor, as an excuse to get these children, these underage individuals, alone and do horrendous things to them. And I have to side-eye his wife, because what grown woman really would believe that a grown male individual is counseling a child in the middle of the night in a bedroom with the door closed? So either she's stupid or she's complicit. Either she's really just that dumb, or she knew exactly what he was doing and she covered for him in his wrong. She knew what he was doing and she helped him get away with it, which is just as worse as what he was doing to that girl. She also mentioned that by the time she turned 16, that this dude really tried to take her out to his car and do relations, if you will, with her in his car. I quote, by this time, Morris was a pastor at Shady Grove Church, which would eventually become Gateway Grand Prairie campus, end quote. Now, eventually, she decided to, and I quote, confide what was happening to her to a close friend who encouraged her to tell her family, end quote. And I'm assuming the reason why she didn't feel safe telling her parents is because they were friends with the man. This is what I keep talking about, these people being friends with the guardians of these minors, which makes it harder for them to go to their parents. Some of them, if they did, they'd be shocked, but they're men and women enough to say, you know what, if they did this to you, we need to seek justice. But some of these people, adults, are so brainwashed and deluded and just as sick in their head as the abusers, that even if their children did go to them, nothing would happen. And that's a very sad thing. Thank God for real that she had a friend that she could talk to, that she could confide in, who she could trust to help her do the right thing, advise her to do the right thing, and not just stay like how a lot of women have been told to do, and children have been told to do. Thank God for all the people who, when a victim came to them, they helped them. They did the right thing and didn't tell them to just stay there because it was the pastor or whoever. So then she told her family after that, and allegedly her father was so angry that he went to the head pastor of Shady Grove and told him, and I quote, that if Morris didn't get out of ministry, he would get the police involved, end quote. This is apparently, allegedly, what really caused him to finally step away. Not because he woke up one day and found out that he was doing a very horrible thing, realizing that he was a heinous person for what he did, that it wasn't moral failure. It was statutory. It was the R word. It's sad that a father has to threaten a man for him to understand that what he's doing is beyond unacceptable, and that if he does not stop, there will be severe repercussions. That allegedly is what finally put an end to him doing what he was doing to her and taking that alleged 2-year period away from the pulpit. When somebody's that deep into their unrighteousness and their sinful lifestyle and abusing somebody, especially a child, that it takes threats from another adult for them to wake up, this is why I keep saying forgivable but not excusable. He needs to be thrown into prison still and have the key thrown away. Because some of these people will continue to hurt people and children until violence is introduced into their accountability. That's why I keep saying that they need to be shamed, because there's no other way to go about some of these situations and deal with some of these people. Shame and them getting their behinds whipped and put in prison. It's the only thing that's going to make them stop. Now, admittedly, I am side-eyeing the father, the parents, but the father especially, and I get it. He was the one who told him that he needed to step down or some things were going to happen. But first of all, when your daughter tells you she's been abused that way by a grown adult for X amount of years as a minor, you don't tell them if you don't step down and calling the police. You call the police, and that's after you whip his behind first, because that's how I would have handled that situation. I find out you're messing around with my child, and I don't even have children, but I still feel very strongly about this pertaining to these kids. I find out you messing around with one of these kids, your behind is getting whooped, and then the police are being called. If I gotta go to jail, then that's just what it is. Maybe they'll understand on the way and have some kind of mercy and be like, okay, You did everybody a solid by getting this PDF file, if you will. Doing the right punishment to him for what he did. We'll excuse it. But like I said, some physical and legal repercussions will be dished out. So again, I'm giving him the side eye because how does this happen for 4 years, mostly under your own roof, and you not know this? You not realize something is off. I'm questioning your discernment because if you had it, you would have known. But again, that comes with the Holy Spirit, which clearly most people don't have, let alone be led by the Holy Spirit. And then again, when you found the information, how you responded, questionable to me. But at least he did request for the man to step down or the police would be called. Like I said, I would have been called the police. That's an instant once you've done something like this. You've broken the law in such a heinous way. Now, of course, I'm pretty sure before that 2-year period and even afterwards, when he really never needed to be back working again as a pastor, let alone a youth pastor or around children at all, them people down there allegedly at that church wanted him back into the ministry, but her father made it known that he did not want them to do that. He didn't feel like that was a good idea because of what he'd done to his daughter, but they kept just insisting. And then she also cleared up the misconception, the false thing that he was putting out, the lies, saying that her father, and I quote, never gave his blessing on Robert returning to ministry. My father told him he's lucky he didn't unalive him. She also said, and I quote, I am mortified that he is telling the world my dad gave his blessing. Of course we forgave because we are called to biblically forgive those who sin against us, but that does not mean he's supposed to go on without repercussions, end quote. And I can't help but to agree, and then some. I couldn't agree more. These people, especially in the church, they take forgiveness and they twist it. Just because we're forgiving you doesn't mean you're off the hook. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation because the person who offended, who abused, who traumatized would have to actually wake up and realize what they did was wrong, apologize, and seek the forgiveness of those who they have offended, hurt, abused, traumatized. That didn't necessarily happen in this situation. Like I said, I don't believe he once went to that young woman, that girl, when she was a girl, when he committed his offense and apologized to her and had any kind of legal repercussions. I don't believe he went in front of his congregation and admitted that he did a heinous thing. Again, this ain't no moral mess up. What he did was statutory, R-word, PDF file behavior. Audacity of this man and the people who enabled him, the church people around him who put him back on that pedestal and in that pulpit to enable his behavior, like I said, not even include the legal aspect, and to lie and say that that woman's father said, oh, I forgive you enough to want you back on that pulpit. And it has nothing to do with forgiving him enough to allow him back on there. It has to do with once you cross certain boundaries, break certain laws, mishandle people or children in certain ways, forgiveness does not cover you. Forgiveness does not excuse you, justify you, or keep you from dealing with the consequences of what you did. And it's sad that these church people who should be setting an example of godliness before the entire world are doing the opposite, making people not wanting to be involved with God or the church because they're thinking, well, if God acts like this and treats people this way who've been sexually assaulted by adults who had no control in that situation because they were a child being abused by an adult, then what are these people? What is this God that you claim you serve that would have you out here acting like this? They're not going to want to be involved, and it's sad. They would rather worship these pastors, these traveling evangelists, and these televangelists instead of the actual God who created all of us. They would rather further victimize victims and cover people who are blatantly in their wrong and use the scriptures out of context and twist them to justify it than do the right thing, what they were originally called to do. It's really sad, like I told y'all before. Now, she did file a civil lawsuit, but the attorney of Pastor Morris, this is the person I was telling y'all about earlier, the sick-minded, raggedy behind individual who tried to make it seem like it was her fault and tried to make it seem like she was being, and I quote, flirtatious. It's like, did you all miss the part where she was a minor? She was a 12-year-old child when he did this to her. He should have been in jail, under the jail for that matter, for that alone. It's like they completely blacked out when it came to the legal part of all of this. The actual part where it was against the law for him to even touch her that way at that age because she was a minor. That attorney of his that said that about her needs to be barred. I said what I said, and Morris needs to be in prison. She only asked for $50,000, y'all, in order to cover the cost of her counseling that she had to get because of what he did to her. They didn't even want to give her that. They offered her literally half of it and said that they'd give it to her if she signed a non-disclosure agreement, but she refused. And I quite frankly don't blame her. I wouldn't have blamed her if she would have signed it to get the money so that she could try to repair her life, all the damage that was done, even after all these years. But I also don't blame her for not signing the NDA. Again, NDAs don't cover illegal activity, so I don't even know why they even tried that angle, how that was even legal to do that. But again, these people who have power, money, and influence, they get away with a whole lot. We've seen that a lot. And it's sad that they put her through that. I also told the Christian Post that she has been trying to warn other churches and pastors for a while now about what happened to her because she doesn't believe, and I quote, she's the only one who suffered his abuse, end quote. And I said this before, if he lied about her being an adult when she was a child and a minor when he did what he did, if he lied about it not being intercourse when he inserted his fingers allegedly, which is intercourse, whether people want to accept that or not, if he lied about having her father's blessing to go back into the ministry, which like I said, it's all the way messed up, like that entire chain of authority, the idea of, oh, well, I just have to ask the pastor or the father of the victim, and if he says, oh yeah, I can go back into the ministry after what you did, when you need to be set down, point period blank, it's just wild to me. There are entire denominations, their bottom line is, if you are a PDF file, if you have done inappropriate things with children, we do not allow you to operate within our denomination. They don't even license you. They have background checks, and if you fail them, you don't get to call yourself I'm part of this denomination, myself a pastor, this, whatever. But the sad part is, he didn't even get any of that. He should have gotten jail time. He should have gotten stripped of his position as a pastor and never allowed to pastor or be around a child again. He should have been put on a registry. All of that was foregone, which is crazy to me. And it could be because it was back in the 80s. Remember what I said? They weren't really looking out for kids and women a lot of times like that either. Back in that day, you got abused. Unfortunately, your story was not heard. And some people who were privileged to not be in those positions and not get taken advantage of, who had people around them that protected them, have the audacity to complain about why all these women and children are coming out now. Shame on you. You have no right to complain. You should be thanking God you didn't go through what they went through. And it's not that people are coming out all of a sudden. This stuff has been going on to a magnitude that people do not want to accept. That's why it seems like it's all of a sudden. These women, these children are coming out more because they are more comfortable. They feel safer. We are in an environment now where it is a little bit safer for people to come out and name the people who victimized them. Wasn't like that back in the day. That's why it seems like it's so many now. It's always been a lot of people. They just didn't say anything because they didn't felt, heard, seen. Many people tried to smother their story because they didn't want to see their favorite pastor or celebrity or whoever in their family in the negative light that person chose to paint themselves in when they did what they did. This woman has also been saying she doesn't think he should be allowed in the ministry. He should have never been allowed in the ministry. And she pointed out something that I've been seeing a lot of people point out on social media. If a teacher had gotten caught up with these kind of allegations, a doctor, a daycare worker, license would be snatched. They would not allow them back into these fields. Again, they'd be on a registry after jail time, extended prison time. So why are we making these exceptions for pastors? Another layer of this that really disgusts me when it comes to some of these church people, because it's not all of them. It's a lot of them, but it's not all of them. So these people that are a part of that church's community spoke to the Christian Post. They put out this long, very generic post that I guess they want their members to keep regurgitating if anybody asks them about this issue, pushing these same false narratives, lies, excuses that they've been pushing all this time. Still covering for this man, talking about, oh, he's already admitted to over 35 years ago, because I think technically this is year 37 since that happened. Talking about he's already mentioned it, he's already spoke about it and called himself out, and he was forthright, as they said, about his moral failure. Like I said, to call it a moral failure, that's such a slap in the face to the victim. That's such a minimization, like I said before. And no, he didn't. No, he wasn't forthright. Because if he was, he wouldn't be in this situation. If he would have admitted what he did when he did it and didn't lie about the details and took accountability, some jail time being on the registry, like I said before, and actually did some self-reflection and went through the forgiveness process and the restoration process and repented, this woman would not still be trying to get justice and alert people as to what he did to her all these years and tried to lie and cover it up with the help of these people that goes to his church. That 2-year restoration process is a load of hogwash, especially if one, like I said before, it really did take her father threatening him just to make him step down and do what he was supposed to do and still not take accountability. Because I don't believe he apologized, like I said, to her or ever really got things right. I don't believe he really truly repented to God. And 2 of the people who were the alleged witnesses to this restoration process that could speak for it are the same people that's helping him cover it up, that's been helping him cover it up and cover for him. I don't believe it. Like I said, that 2-year restoration process that they're claiming is hogwash if those 2 factors are the case, which it seems like allegedly in this case, they very much are. Now, a lot of people on YouTube and Twitter were not having these excuses. They were not having the justifications that he was trying to make for himself, nor the church trying to justify him. They were not here for the minimization of this woman's pain when she was 12, and they were saying all this stuff to make him seem more innocent and her seem completely guilty. Molesting a child of 12 years old for 4 years is not a moral failure, it's a crime, and he can stop with the semantics to minimize. One YouTuber said, like I said before, these people are trying to make it seem like this woman was not a child when this took place. They're trying to make it seem like it's not as bad as it is. He and everybody covering for him was trying to minimize the situation and the gravity of what he did. Another YouTuber said, evil and disgusting, he should be in jail. The families and church should be charged for hiding him and not reporting to the police. I didn't said this before. Any adult who knows that an adult is taking advantage of a child and does not report it, especially if they are covering it up, they know it and they are intentionally covering it up or helping them to get access to abuse more children. Those individuals, those adults need to be charged as well. Another YouTuber said the fact that he only admitted to moral failure, which was after the fact, mind you, is absurd. What he did was sinful, but also violated a 12-year-old girl. He sexually molesting her, then said, don't tell anyone or it'll ruin everything, is arrogance and evil. What's sadly happening in the church is that the elders and leaders are doing more to protect the pastor and the reputation of the pastor and their church and money it brings in. This is not the church where Jesus is the head. It is not how the church is supposed to be. And that statement is 100% true. It is true that God didn't tell us to air out everybody's dirty laundry because we all have a past, but he also didn't say to cover for people while they are committing crimes, actively and intentionally sinning against God and hurting and abusing people, minus the repentance. You're not just going to come up here and hurt children, women, men, whoever it is, and keep going on and God not do something about it. As a matter of fact, him being exposed like this is probably also God's judgment because he chose to never actually be accountable for what he did and make it right with that woman. So now he gets to be exposed. That's why I don't feel sorry for these people, especially in the church. You're supposed to be the main people doing what's right. You're out here taking advantage of people's children. You need to be exposed. We need to see who you are so we can stay away from you and keep our children away from you too. And another thing this person talked about was the arrogance of it all. This man was so arrogant, he felt so high and mighty that he could do whatever he wanted to, and people were going to put him right back on the pedestal that they put him on. Once he stepped down, all he had to do was say, I repent and I asked this person XYZ, knowing good and full well he didn't. Another YouTuber was talking about how he was very prideful, talking about how people elevated him because he was so gifted, this, that, and the other. But this is what happens when the church gives anybody a platform. Just because a person can preach, even if they have a gift, a talent, if you will, that was given to them by God, that does not mean they need to be put in a pulpit. They need to be given a position of leadership because 9 times out of 10, they don't have what it takes to be there. Most of the people who God did ordain to be there still have to do the work to not fall into temptation, lust, sin, and perversion. But what some people don't want to accept, especially in the church, is there are people who they keep platforming, like I said before, who don't want to do the right thing. They are lustful, they are perverted, and they have no intentions of exercising self-control, actually being saved, asking God for help, praying, fasting, reading his Bible, her Bible, point period blank. They have all the intentions of taking advantage of the power and influence that comes with that position and having people cover for them. And the moment you put them in there, that's exactly what they're going to do. Jane on YouTube said the only reasonable follow-up to it happened in his 20s. Let me pause that quote real fast by saying, once again, they tried to justify what he did by making it seem like, oh, he was so young and innocent and didn't know what he was doing, even though he was a grown adult messing with a child. Continuing with the quote, is that he served 10 years in prison, went to therapy, keeps away from youth ministries, and is in regular contact with probation officers and accountability partners. He's deeply grieved by his sin and begs for forgiveness. That's what him being in his 20s, them trying to use that as a justification. Oh, I was in my 20s, it happened in my 20s. That's what that should have been followed up with. But it was not, because they failed that woman where justice was concerned and where God was concerned, because they were not good godly examples. They failed her and they failed God, which is the point that people are really failing to realize, especially in the church, how much we fail God when we don't do the right thing, when we don't hold ourselves and other people accountable for the heinous actions that's being committed, especially towards the little ones. Did y'all forget that God hates when people messes over the little ones? The innocent ones? I guess they forgot about that in the middle of covering for their pastor's sin and his continued criminal behavior against children, allegedly, while also making a cult-like following with their churches. Christy on YouTube said, are people saying that? I cannot understand the ways the evangelical church has fallen away from the true Christ. This is deeply disturbing to my soul. It's also deeply disturbing to my soul as well, Christy. Jennifer White on Twitter said, I'm just gonna say this and I'm done. A public school teacher who makes a mistake, she puts in quotation marks, with students is done, she puts in all caps, teaching in any public school, even if they were in their 20s. Again, noting that there's a standard of how we deal with individuals who are adults, who mishandle, who handle wrongly children, minors. So if the world and the worldly secular standard can get that correctly, what in the world is wrong with the church? Why didn't that pastor receive the same kind of accountability? The pastor, mind you. Again, people were acknowledging that this was a child who we were talking about, who this happened to. They kept trying to make it seem like she was an adult, she was a child. And they also pointed out, while they kept saying, oh, he was in his 20s. Oh, so he was in his 20s and that excuses what he did, but he was old enough to be married and have his own child. Because remember, y'all, this was a whole married man with a kid when he did this. Another person also brought up something concerning the church, which I've said before in this video. There are some denominations who do require background checks. And if you have been mishandling individuals, whether it's adults or children, you ain't getting no license. You're not going to operate within their denomination. Go somewhere else and call yourself something, but you won't do it underneath their jurisdiction. That's how they keep people who are PDF files and individuals like this man from doing what they have done to these people. And because they don't want it to be said that their organization aided and abetted you in hurting people. This person was saying there needs to be a process, policies, rules, procedures. How you handle this. Okay, so if somebody comes to you in your church and they say, okay, pastor, first lady, whoever it is, the deacon has been doing XYZ to my daughter, to my son. You don't cover for them. You call the police. Even if it's the freaking pastor, it could be a bishop for all I care. If you go to somebody in that church who is the person that you go to, the group, the committee you go to with these issues, and they don't call the police, y'all are raggedy. That's all I have to say about it. You're raggedy. And God is not pleased. Again, how do you call yourselves Christians when y'all are allowing this to happen in your churches? I done told y'all before, I'm calling the police. I'll be one of the first people to call the police. Not just about to be doing stuff, and then I know you're doing it. Oh no. Repercussions will be had. The police will be called. Another person was pointing out once again with that 20-year-old excuse, which is why I keep saying stop babyfying these 21-year-olds, these 20-something-year-olds. By justifying what they did or excusing it because of their young age, you are letting all these young men in the church know all they have to do is run to the church leaders and they'll be excused. Oh, go preach the gospel, even if God didn't call you to do it. You don't even know the Bible. You don't have a relationship with God. But they'll make sure to cover for you if you screw over somebody's daughter, whether she's underage or not. Again, this goes with the R word culture. Justifying, using whatever excuse to justify men hurting young women, men hurting children. There's no excuse for it, and we have to start shaming people who do it and who excuse it. I'm going to say this again, once again, because these people who keep saying, oh, he already accounted for this. No, he didn't. If he would have came out whenever this first happened, whenever he first did what he did and apologized to that young girl, to her family, did some jail time, some actual accountability, and stepped away from the pulpit, period, because you're not going back into the pulpit after you do that to somebody's child, or you shouldn't be, at least. You shouldn't be allowed to. If he would have actually taken that accountability and been truthful from the get-go, once again, this would not be happening. So to say that he took accountability for it is a blatant lie, because he did not. He knew what he did was wrong. He continued to do it anyways because he liked being in the position of power that allowed him to take advantage of somebody's daughter. He wanted continued access to that platform so he could keep getting money, be rich, and take advantage of people, to feed his lust and stroke his pride. This video has been long enough. I've gotten as much off my chest as I could. I've talked about as many things as I could think about concerning this. I stand by what I said. He still needs to be in prison. I don't care if this woman was 100 years old. If she was still alive and he's still alive and she wanted justice, she deserves it. Y'all let me know what y'all think and how y'all feel down in the comments, though. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Y'all all have a very blessed, beautiful, and safe day.